Today's video is sponsored by Mobalytics. Mobalytics is an all-in-one trusted companion app that runs on Overwolf that helps players of all skill levels improve. It scouts out every player in the game and gives you build recommendations from the absolute best players on the server to let you know how to win the game. Mobalytics will give you exclusive information tailored to your current game, such as matchup information so you can know exactly when and how to strike. Check out the link in the description and get a huge leg up on the competition by downloading Mobalytics today. Hey guys, what is up? Aoki here bringing you the official preseason tier list. Now, this is coming a little bit late because I didn't want to be one of those content creators that just the second preseason drops, drop a tier list and pretend like I knew what was going on. I wanted to play with it for a little bit. I wanted to get a couple dozen or a couple hundred games on the patch so I can really feel like I have a good qualitative, grasp on the meta. So sorry that this tier list is coming out a little late, but trust me, this is going to be way more accurate than if I made it like 2 weeks ago or whatever. So getting into it, guys, there's been a lot of changes going into the preseason. Most notably, we have these big new tank items, and they are going to be playing a big impact on which supports are strong. So basically, this video is going to be about these are the champions that you should play. These are the champions that you should avoid. And hopefully you guys are going to learn a lot about like how the meta is right now. If this is your very first time on the channel, my name is Aoki. I am a multi-season high elo support player. I've got tons and tons of solo queue experience at every single elo. I also have a lot of competitive experience, so I feel like I'm a player who has a pretty good grasp on the game and knowing what is strong and bad. So going into it, we're not going to spend too much time on tier 5 and tier 4. Basically, these champions are absolute trash. I really do not. I genuinely think Annie support is like the worst support you could possibly play in the game. Renekton, Ivern, Nunu, Malzahar, Zoe, Azir. Some of these are fun. You absolutely can make these champions work, but you are 100% like making your life harder on purpose by selecting them. Can Malzahar work as a support? Yeah. He's got a suppression. He can work. Can Nunu work as a support? Yeah, you can go tank, you can go utility. Yes, but like, should you be locking these champions in? No. I honestly think these champions are like so bad that it's not even fun. Now, we're getting into tier 4, which you are hurting your climb by playing these champions, but these champions can absolutely be played as support. You're just going to have to put in a lot of effort, a lot of, you're going to have a lot of champion mastery to make them work. Going to have to know how to pilot them really well. You know, Volibear is super fun. Rammus is surprisingly fun as a support. And a lot of these champions, I actually play quite a lot because it's not always about playing the absolute tippity top. It's just fun to lock in things like Jhin support and Ahri support. They can work. Malphite, I'm sure you guys know, that's like my favorite off-meta support. You go full AP, just one-shot people. Orianna has a surprising amount of like poke and utility, but like the thing is like you are 100% hurting your climb by these champions. I could never in good faith say, yeah, go ahead and lock in Ziggs support to climb, guys. Like, yeah, go out there and one-trick Ziggs support. It's just, you should probably avoid these champions if your main motivation for the goal is climbing. Now, not everybody's main motivation is climbing. Some people just want to lock in, you know, APJ4 and have some fun. So feel free to do that. I don't want this video to feel like I'm discouraging that. You should always, this is a video game first and foremost. But all right, getting into tier 3, these champions are average. And as you can tell, this is where the majority of champions fall. These champions should really only be played if you're skilled with them or used as counter picks. This is going to make up the bulk majority of champions because I feel like in season, what are we going into? Season 13, well, right now anyways, in the preseason, the amount of champions at the absolute tippity top are very, very, it's very specialized. So these champions are all okay. And I really want to emphasize this counter picks point because a lot of champions here should really only ever be locked in when you already see what the enemy team bot lane is playing. So let's get into it, guys. We got Shaco. I really think that Shaco is a super fun support. He absolutely can 1v9 from the support position, but you really need to know what you're doing. You really need to know all the tricks because this is not a champion that you lock in and just has like some nice inherent value. You know, he's not great at peeling. He's not great at poking. He can't really assassinate since you're working on a gold budget. A support gold budget. So you really need to like super know in depth the champion and put a lot of practice into him. That being said, Shaco support can carry. Xerath support, I think that all mage supports right now, going into season 13 where everyone is just like becoming these behemoth tanks, even champions that aren't tanks are tanks. If you can't reliably build Liandry's as a mage, you are a pretty bad mage support. So unfortunately, Xerath is probably like the worst mage support in the game. Followed closely by Vex. Not to say these champions cannot carry. My Vex especially, I love carrying with Vex support, But it's kind of awkward to go Leandries on that champion. You always kind of go like Night Harvester or Ludens. So that's kind of like the rule of thumb for Season 13 right now when everyone has these massive health pools from all these crazy tank items. You know, we got Heartsteel stacking infinitely. Well, Leandries is the answer to that. So if your champion can't build Leandries, it's probably not going to do very good. Also, these two champions are, if they can't one-shot someone, they're pretty useless. Like the poke from Xerath is very skill shot based and negligible. You're not going to be landing everything every game. Vex, she goes in on her ult, and if she doesn't one-shot and gets a reset, she's probably going to die. Bard, very, very cool champion, super good in the right hands, but like he's one of those champions that actually these two champions, we'll talk about them together because they actually are great champions, excellently designed, and they're not performing terribly in the meta right now, but there's so many easier options that I can't in good faith recommend you to lock in Thresh unless you're a Thresh one trick. Same thing for Bard. If you're a Bard one trick, if you eat, sleep, breathe Bard, he's up in tier 2, maybe even tier 1. But like, if you just play Bard like once a week or something, it's not worth it. It's not worth the trouble. Pantheon has always been a very, very cheese-based champion. Kind of the same thing with Vex. He's like AD Vex. He goes in, and if he can't one-shot, he's probably going to die. That being said, super high 1v9 potential. Alistar. So let's go ahead and talk about tank supports, because there's a big misconception right now that we are in a tank meta. Because, you know, Riot released all these broken tank items, and I'm sure you're seeing them every single game. You know, this Heartsteel, this Radiant Virtue, this, I can't think of the other ones off the top of my head, but like, all these new tank items, you know, the Iceborne Gauntlet rework, all these new tank items, people are like, oh, we're in a tank meta, you gotta lock in a tank support, right? Actually, no. Tank supports are not even the ones that are getting the biggest benefit of us being in a tank support meta. The ones that are benefiting the most, surprisingly, are enchanters, things that can make an already unkillable Scion even more unkillable and just carry through him, and champions that can melt tanks. So we'll get into that, but I just want to put my statement out there that I don't think we're in a tank support meta at all. I think they're quite bad. So we have Alistar, we have Nautilus, we have Leona, all in this very average tier 3 area. Now, there is one exception to that. There is one tank support that is absolutely bonkers right now, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, Alistar, very, very average. The only nice thing about him is that he can abuse 2 different rune pages. He can very much, actually 3. He can go Phase Rush, Glacial, he can go Aftershock, and they're all really good rune pages. But unless you're like freaking Alicopter out there, like knowing all the routes and how to abuse Hex Flash and gank mid and make all these crazy like Q Flash plays, probably not playing Alistar is the play. Tom Kinch, they have tried really, really hard to make this guy into a good tank support. They've given him so many buffs, so many reworks. I even saw they buffed his AP ratio, just like desperately trying to get him to be played support. He's just not very good as support. The only exception to that is when paired with Senna. Tom Kinch Senna, doesn't really matter which one you consider the support or the carry. That is a broken lane. Tom Kinch with any other marksman, not great. Morgana. Now, as I said earlier, we really want to emphasize this counter pick. Morgana is always going to be the queen of counter picks. If they lock in a Leona, if they lock in a Blitzcrank, you go Morgana and you have won the lane. You have completely neutralized the enemy support, you assuming that you can land spell shields and bindings. But yeah, Morgana is always going to be the absolute best counter pick support in the entire game. She shuts down an entire class of supports. Lulu, I don't know if people are going to be happy or sad about this. Lulu's worse than she's been in a long time, and I think because she's an enchanter that pairs really, really well with hypercarry ADCs. Well, we're not really in like a hypercarry ADC meta. The only ADCs that are really thriving right now are things like Vayne that can cut through all these tanks with true damage. So there's better. I talked earlier about how like we're actually are in an enchanter meta where you want to pick an enchanter that can empower a tank. There's just better supports that can do that, and we'll get to that later. Trundle, the only thing he has going for him is that he is actually a pretty good anti-tank pick, but mostly from the jungle and top position. Like, he does have an ultimate that shreds the resistances of tanks and like makes himself super tanky temporarily, but like the most value you're going to get out of that, like you don't want that on your support that is 3 levels down on their top laner, right? You want that on the top laner to melt the enemy top laner. Fiddlesticks, surprisingly really, really good. He was broken there for a while, but the meta has just kind of shifted, and there hasn't been a nerf or buff to him, I don't think, in a while, but he is surprisingly good, so he does have the cheese and surprise factor going for him, but he's not amazing right now. Syndra, the rework has just generally buffed her as a champion, not necessarily as a support, but she is much better as a champion than she was last season. I love playing her as a support, but like, she's not the best. She definitely is like snowball dependent. Vel'Koz is kind of in a weird spot where, like, I think he might actually be one of the most outdated champions in the game. It takes a lot of practice to get all these angles and geometry down with not so much of a reward for him unless you are just like 4 kills up on everyone, which is not likely to happen if you're a support. Vel'Koz is just kind of a weird champion. I can't recommend them. Seraphine, kind of slacking. She has, the champion that she is always compared to, Sona, is kind of just a better version of her right now. Not to say that I agree with that comparison. I think Seraphine and Sona play differently, feel differently, provide different things to a team, but there's always that surface level comparison of, oh, Seraphine is just Sona, version 2. Anyway, Sona's way better. You'll see her up higher on the tier list. Braum, I'm not talking about Braum. Ornn is decent. Gragas is pretty good. He's got really nice, versatile rune pages, just like Alistar. You can go Phase Rush, Glacial, Electrocute, Aftershock. He's really, really good at denying champions like Leona and Nautilus for going in. You see Nautilus land a hook, you body slam him out of it. You see Leona press E, you body slam her out of it. That's it. Yuumi is probably the most obnoxious champion in the entire game, so I am happy to report that she's not doing very good right now. Surprisingly, her solo queue win rate is really, really low, but it's always going to be low because she has super low agency. It's not like, even when she's strong, I don't really even recommend that people play Yuumi for like free LP or anything. Like, because even when she's strong, she's going to have like a 48% win rate in solo. So unless you're duoing with someone. But yeah, anyways, like, we're not in like a hyper carry jungle meta right now. We're in a like prolonged tank fight and bruiser fight. And you can empower people with Yuumi, but I'm seeing less of a payoff for that. Like, it's, when Blue Kayn is super strong and you put a Yuumi on top of him, he goes from being like a 9 out of 10 champion to an 11 out of 10 champion. But right now we're in like this big bulky tank meta where it's like putting your Yuumi on a fed, I don't know, set is going to take him from like a 9 to a 9.5. So there's just less payoff and it doesn't seem worth it playing that champion. Talia, I think she's super well designed. I love that we have more anti-mobility champions in the game in addition to Poppy, because there's way too much mobility in this game. But pretty average overall. Shin, I always describe Shin as like a riskier version of Leona. And I always say that because he does way more damage. Honestly, he's probably a better support in general right now. But if you ever miss your taunt, you are in the middle of the team without proccing your Aftershock, without proccing your Glacial, without proccing your CC, you're probably going to instantly die. Whereas, like, if you make a mistake, which everyone makes mistakes, even me, believe it or not, if you make a mistake as Leona and miss your E, you're down a cooldown. You might take a little bit of poke, but you're going to live. Zac, super, super fun, not super incredible right now. I just made a Zac video recently. Definitely go watch that if you want to learn how to play it. Sylas. I didn't even have Sylas on this tier list until this patch, because I just recently realized this champion is the most overloaded champion I have ever seen in my entire life. I've been playing him mid. I've been playing him support. As support, you want to go Aftershock and just try to be a hyper carry. He's obviously more effective in the mid role, but he can 100% be played as support. I always thought it was just freaking weirdos, like one tricks that were playing him as support. No, this champion is a support. He can be played as support. Definitely check him out. Super, super fun. But if this was a mid lane tier list, he'd be much higher is what I'll say. Nautilus, we've already kind of talked about. The tanks, I want to actually swap Nautilus with Leona here, because I think that Nautilus, of the tank supports, other than the one exception that we're going to get to above, Nautilus is probably just one of the most inherently useful champions in the game. You cannot miss your R, you cannot miss your auto attacks. You've got great hook. You can actually survive ganks. Like, let's say you're pushed up to the enemy turret, you're getting ganked. You can hook to your wall and actually survive, whereas like Leona just dies there. Of the tank supports, I think Nautilus is probably the best one. But again, we are not in a tank support meta. This huge misconception that these new broken items are going to make every tank and every role broken. Well, they do for jungle and for top, and sometimes even mid and ADC, but not really for support. And the reason being is that these new items, they're not better than the standard items that the support tanks already have. You're not going to be locking in Radiant Virtue over Locket on Leona. You're not going to be locking in Heartsteel on Nautilus over Even Shroud. That's such a dumb item name, by the way, Even Shroud. But anyways, they're just not better than the already built-in tank items. So I want to get that misconception out of people's heads. Leona is really, really struggling. I just genuinely think that she's in the same camp as Vel'Koz as a very, very outdated champion. Like, I was watching a support streamer the other day play her, and she would go in, she would EQ in, and then drop the R instantly. And before her R came down and stunned him for the CC train, people's tenacity was making it so they were already out of the stun. They were already in a different place, and they were just raging. And they were like, "How can they do that? Literally, tenacity counters my entire champion," which is true. This champion, they need to do something to Leona. She's been struggling for a while now. Rakan, super fun champion, and I think that Rakan really encapsulates tier 3 in general. This champion is a jack of all trades, master of none. It's very rare for this champion to drop above or below tier 3 on my list, because he's just kind of there. He's just kind of decent at everything. He's a good at shielder, a good peeler, a good engager, a little dependent on his flash for his engages, but decent at everything and the best in the game at nothing. So here's what I say about Rakan. If you already have a well-rounded composition and you don't need a healer, you don't need a pure frontline, it's okay to slot Rakan into those games. But other than that, I wouldn't be first picking him. He's got a lot of hard matchups, and he's just not the best at anything. Lux. I'm going to be keeping my eye on Lux because I have a feeling Riot is about to absolutely break her. They are adding 20% to her ult ratio, AP ratio, next patch, probably to sell more Lux skins. But as for now, she's pretty she's pretty standard. I talked earlier about like mages that can go Liandry's. Yeah, sure, she can go Liandry's, but like it's much better for her to go Night Harvest or Ludens. So it's kind of awkward to itemize like that. Nico, she's okay. She's like kind of a more short range, riskier version of Lux. I'm gonna swap these just because I think Lux is better in general. Yeah, Nico is kind of like the Shaco effect, where it's like if you're a Nico one trick, you can definitely make this work. She can be played in like 3 or 4 lanes. But if you don't have a lot of experience with her, just lock in Lux. Galio is kind of like an answer to tanks. So here's how I say if you want to lock in Galio. This goes for competitive and for solo. If the enemy team locks in a tank support and you need a tank support, like you don't have a tank somewhere else on the team, then you can go Galio. He's also got a lot of really fun synergies with champions like Nocturne. So they can, he can turn out the lights and ult in on someone, and then you can Galio ult on top of that, and the enemy team has no idea what hit them. But overall, pretty average. Same thing for Set. Definitely want to be playing this guy in a cheese aggressive manner, like abusing hex flashing from bush to bush, trying to one-shot and snowball. Veigar is just one of those champions that everyone thinks is super good at support, but he's just not. It's awkward to play Veigar as a support because you're not like constantly stacking up your Q because you're not the one farming. His cage is nice. It denies a lot of mobility, but beyond that, like you're pretty much just a cage bot when you play Veigar support. We're going to talk about these two champions together because I play them a lot on my channels and I really like playing them, but right now I cannot in good faith recommend you to play them. Ashe and Misfortune, super fun, super pokey. They both bring a lot of utility and a lot of hyper carry potential from the support position, but like you're always going to have the negatives of putting 2 marksmen in one lane, which is just a giant red flag for the enemy team to come gank you. Yeah, I think that Misfortune might be in a little bit of a better position because she can very easily build Liandry's. It's an expensive item for support, but like Liandry's is better on Misfortune than it is on Ashe. Pyke, most frustrating champion in the entire game. If you like Pyke, if you love Pyke like me, you will always play Pyke regardless of how bad he is. But I want you to know, be warned when you play this champion. He is the most frustrating champion to play when the game goes even. Like, you genuinely feel like you have to play absolutely perfectly to have like a 50-50 chance of winning the game as Pyke. You have to snowball. You get outskilled by literally everyone. You have to know all the mechanics. You have to know when you can sneak in an auto attack off of a hook or go for a pick. You have to be thinking about like, oh, is this guy's flash up? Because if I press R and he flashes, then I'm going to die. He's just one of the most high effort champions in the entire game with very little payoff. If you only play Pyke if you love him. Now we come to the saddest part of the tier list. Senna is really hurting right now. I don't know. She just really needs a buff in my opinion. And maybe that's biased because I am the rank 1 Senna, right? I play a lot of her, so I see a lot of her matchups and a lot of her bad things come out. But yeah, the only thing that she has going for her right now is that people are actually locking in tanks, and Senna does much better in slower controlled fights. But she just does not have the oomph, she does not have the damage or survivability to really exist in the game right now. Maokai is pretty good. He's up there for tank supports, especially because you can go full tank, you can go, you know, a hybrid build where it's like you go aftershock but then build full AP. And he has great vision control with his E, has great objective controls. If you get there soon, just throw saplings everywhere and then the enemy team can't contest dragons. But as for like actual frontline in the support position is not very good right now. So you're really only locking him because he's super easy to play, very hard to play against, and just has a lot of inherent value. And then we've already talked about Nautilus. So now we're going to be getting into tier 2, guys. These champions are very good on the current patch. Surprisingly, Swain has a very diverse variable, lots of different variable builds that he can go. He can go Leandries, he can go into Demonic Embrace, he can go, the new Radiant Virtue item makes him nigh unkillable, gives him a nice little bit of sustain, and actually brings some utility to the team because that item actually heals your allies, surprisingly. So Swain right now, of the mage supports, really good. Rel is way better than people would say she is. People always say that Rel is bad because they don't play her. Rel is not bad. Rel is not bad. Rel is actually very good. The only problem is that she's very unfun to play. She's very clunky. She's very awkward. She's very frustrating. So play Rel if you're desperate for LP, but you're probably not going to have fun. You know who you are going to have fun as, though, is Teemo, baby. Teemo, you've heard it before. I won't go too into it. Teemo is the most underrated support in the entire game. This guy is so gold efficient. He needs one item and he feels like he's full build. He is doing really well at melting tanks right now because he builds Leandries. He has mushrooms everywhere. They step on one, boom, a third of their health bar is gone. Super good. But I know, you've heard it before. Blitzcrank is always going to be kind of good just because he has that cheese factor going for him. You can miss 90% of your hooks and land one important one late game, and you've won the game off that. So it's not because the meta suits him right now. The only thing about the meta that suits him right now is that enchanters are quite strong, and Blitz can hook an enchanter and one-shot them. But like, he's not like good in a bubble. Does that make sense? Like, his stats aren't good, but he's just kind of always decent. Soraka is one of the enchanters that's doing pretty good right now. Good, like, compared to Lulu. You know what I mean? Like, decent compared to Lulu, mostly because there's less, like, assassins being locked in right now, and she can really get in their face and play super aggro. Brand is a mage that very easily builds Leandries, so kind of like how I talked about Xerath is bad, for the same reason, Brand is good. Lots of people are locking in super 10,000 HP tanks right now, and Brand melts through them with his passive and itemization. Renata is kind of in the same camp as Rel, is where people don't play her, so they just assume that she's bad because nobody's playing her. But yeah, she's actually quite good. She's got a lot of things going for her. She's half Enchanter, half Hook champion, half Empowerer. She's got some decent poke and laning phase. Very good champ. Zillion, totally getting slept on right now. Zillion is good in like every single meta, in my opinion. Champion is just absolutely slept on. And the only people that are playing him are one-trick ponies. So his win rate is slightly inflated, but like, just watch a one-trick pony and see how much they get done with them. You really feel like you're like playing a game of chess when you play Zillion. Like, you're like sending in units to get sacrificed, and you get to decide like who comes back to life, and it's a really fun experience to play Zillion. Sona is one of the most brain-dead champions in the entire game, and because of the slower pace of the fights, because nobody's locking in assassins, because these games do have a longer on average game length, Sona just gets to scale for free. She's also good. She, in my opinion, she is the anti-enchanter enchanter. So whenever someone locks in an enchanter, you can lock in Sona, and they don't have very many ways to kill you in lane, so you just get a free laning phase, you get to scale, and nobody in this game scales harder than Sona, by numbers anyways. Taric, once again, just a slept-on champion, great synergies with a lot of champions. That new Radiant Virtue item is amazing on him. Taric is eating good right now. Now let's get to the tier 1. This is the absolute best of the best. These champions should 100% be played if you want to climb. Remember how we talked about how not everybody cares about climbing. Some people just want to have fun. This is for the people who only want to care about climbing. Amumu is the tank that I mentioned earlier that is absolutely freaking killing it in the tank meta. I don't know how this champion is allowed to be this strong. He does so much damage. You literally have kill potential at level 1 the second you walk into lane. He's tanky. He does percent damage. He does well with the new itemization. He's got 4 different mythics he can build. Cracked champion. Heimerdinger, same thing. I mean, we saw it at Worlds. Guys, Heimerdinger support is being played at Worlds. I will say that again for those in the back. Heimerdinger support is being played at Worlds. I thought Heimerdinger used to be one of those champions that, like, you have to be super good and have a massive brain to play. No, I've played him. He's brain dead easy. You do have options with, you know, how you use your different ults. But oh my god, he's so good against all in. He's so good at just having perma prio for bot lane, and which just guarantees you free dragons and lets your jungler do whatever you want. Champion is insane. Karma. If you guys have not seen my first strike Karma video build, definitely go watch it. It is unbelievably broken. That's the build that I recommend everybody goes, by the way. Some people are going like Shurelia's or even Locket or the new, you know, Radiant Virtue item. Those are good builds too, but the first strike build is like an 11 out of 10, and it's the most fun way to play her. Nami, just really good in general. I think she's getting slept on as an Enchanter. I may be a little biased because I genuinely think that Nami is one of the best designed enchanters, but I think that she's really, really succeeding right now. Let me look up her win rate. Just because I'm curious. Win rate isn't like an end-all be-all, but it is like a decent thing to reference. Yeah, Nami has a 52.26% win rate across all ranks. So she is quite strong. She's fun to play. She's doing well in the meta. Now, Janna, I already know this without looking. Janna has the highest win rate in the entire game. So that it goes without saying. This champion is just doing really, really well. And then Zyra is up here because she is the absolute best at applying Liandry's. I really think that Zyra and Brand are interchangeable depending on matchups. But yeah, the worst part about playing Zyra is like picking it early in the draft and then they lock in like Leona, but nobody's playing Leona right now. So that's why I think Zyra has a little bit of an edge over Brand. They're both super, super good mage supports. So there it is, guys. There is the preseason patch list or tier list for supports. These are the champions that you should absolutely be playing. And hopefully I've given you guys a little bit of knowledge about like what is strong and why, and what is weak and why. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Seriously, any questions, put them down in the comments. I do respond to those. And make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, yada, yada. And best of luck out there climbing in preseason. Much freaking love for watching, guys. Take it easy. Peace.